Hello, hello, hello. Good morning and welcome. You are on the mountain with Rick and 6-Bit Glitch, and it is time to go off the cuff. How you doing today, my friend?
Not bad. Thank you for having me. It's been a nice end to the evening here.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. Yeah, over there in Britain, right? What time is it now?
It's about 6 o'clock. Just eaten, just fed the family, finished for the day, and after this, I'm going to go and become one with the sofa.
Alrighty, alrighty. Well, usually we say butt first coffee, but the coffee is still brewing, so butt first monster. But how do you take your coffee?
Black with a tiny bit of cream.
I am black myself, although that sounds very weird to actually say. I'm a big fan of black coffee. Every once in a while, I'll use some of the flavored creamers or whatnot, but overall, I drink the coffee as God intended.
Well, I'm afraid I also have a really bad habit. Rob, who is the other half of Reality Boffins, he's big into his coffee. I'm less into it, but I do at least get fresh beans to grind now. But the rest of the day in the office, because I'm lazy, I drink instant, which Rob describes as a coffee-ish drink and not actually coffee.
Rob sounds like a very learned individual. I am also familiar with instant coffee, and I 100% agree that instant coffee is everything but coffee.
I treat it more like a brown caffeine fix. So I do begrudgingly not call it coffee, you know.
Fair, fair. My best use of instant coffee actually came when I was over in Iraq with the Marine Corps, and in some of the MREs there would be a coffee packet, and in some of the MREs there would be a hot chocolate packet.
Hmm.
And what you would do, and in all of the MREs there was a non-dairy creamer packet. So what you would do is take one of each of those. You dump the coffee and the creamer into the hot chocolate packet because it was the biggest one, and it was also plastic and therefore waterproof. And then you pour in just a tiny amount of water, you fold it over a few times, you shake the ever living fuck out of it, and then you have what we call cowboy pudding.
I can see that. I can see that.
Fucking delicious, I'll tell you what. But this is generally speaking a gaming channel, so the question I generally start out with most of my interviewees is, what was the first game you ever loved?
Wow, that is a loaded question. Oh, first game I ever loved, not the first game I ever played. The first game I ever loved.
Yeah, because first game you ever played, that's easy. Everyone can think of that. First game you ever loved, that's got a little more weight to it.
Crystal Castles.
Ooh.
Arcade Crystal Castles with the original unit and the rolly ball.
I don't think
That-
I've ever even heard of this game, so enlighten me, sir.
So back in the 70s and 80s, my grandfather used to run arcades, and one of the games he had when I was growing up was Crystal Castles, and it's basically, I think it's little Bertie the bear, and it's an isometric. The graphics on it are awesome. There's a good documentary on it actually. I think is it GDC or someone else has got it on it. But it's a proper little big ass rollerball, and you just move the bear around, and you can jump, and you got to collect all the gems, avoid all the gem eaters, avoid the witch, avoid the cloud of bees. And it used to just blow my mind because it was like, I'm a kid in the 80s, and there was this beautiful 3D isometric world, and you could go behind stuff. It wasn't just in front of stuff. And I played that game to death most of my early years and then into my teenage years because he never got rid of this arcade cabinet right up until the late nearly 2000s. That arcade cabinet was still there, so I think I played it solid for like probably going on 15, 16 years.
That's
And
some history right there.
I loved that game, but the worst bit about it is I sucked at it and I never made it past level 4.
I love it. I love it. I love so many games that I am really not very good at, and that's why my personal favorite game series slash I guess I don't know. I think that Diablo at this point is beyond the simplicity of the word series. But yeah, like I was already into role playing games. I had gotten the red box of D&D for
Hmm.
Christmas after my 8th birthday, and I'd been really into a bunch of other stuff. But the first game I ever loved was the original Diablo. And I have been hooked on that franchise. That's the word I was looking for. I've been hooked on that franchise ever since. Even Diablo Immortal, which I have not beaten yet because I don't have enough time in the day to play it, and Diablo 4, which I have not played yet because my potato won't handle it. Um, but
Can I
like
can
Diablo. Oh, go
I can,
ahead.
re- I can relate. I can relate to the Diablo because that I think that was like a second round of gaming, definitely off the back of enjoying things like D&D and Hero Quest and stuff.
And like I enjoyed, and still to this day, I enjoy arcades like as an establishment, but I was never an arcade gamer. You know, like I'll
Mm.
go to have fun for a little while, but I was never the guy who was, at the arcade every day or even like on a weekly basis. Like I can probably count the number of times I've been to an actual arcade on both hands.
I
And
I I was very lucky to have the arcade in the family cafe, and in fact, this is why I played so much. I had all the keys to all the games.
oh damn, this
I
motherfucker.
think
This is a real arcade gamer right here.
there we go. That one. That one there is the 50 key. That was the one we ended up replacing all the arcade keys with that, and that would get me free credits on anything.
Nice. I think my favorite arcade games are the ones that have like the sensors and the actual guns and shit. So
Mm.
like I mean there's so many different titles available for that style of gameplay, but the I think it's Mass Effect is the one that's like used as the industry term, right? Mass Effect style games where you've got the duck hunt style rifle
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah. So
and
it's just like in the early ones just had like the white dot on it and stuff.
yeah, and like XS Orlando. I the last time I went to an arcade, and this is literally probably a decade plus ago. Um, XS Orlando was the place where I went, and it was one of these places where you paid X amount going in, and then you just got a wristband that was good for however long.
Mm.
And there are certain things that you still have to pay additionally for, but in general that covers pretty much everything. And they had this fucking rock climbing game that was literally like it was a computer screen and it was a treadmill that was mounted vertically that had handholds on it. And it moved, it actuated back and forth as you were going up, so you actually felt like you were climbing the mountain that you were looking at. And it got to one point where it was actually like a negative fucking grade. Like I'm gravity is actively pulling me off of the wall, not just fucking like down.
So like
And
tilt the whole thing tilting.
yeah, exactly. The whole thing tilted, and it was so much fucking fun. And I swear to God, I did a single fucking round on that game, and I was still on that wall almost an hour and a half later. Because I guess I just found a skill that I never knew I had. I had not been into rock climbing up until that point. But goddamn, have arcade games gotten fucking intense, and I love it.
Yeah, we I think it was like a couple of months ago. We were up near us, near Manchester. There's a big arcade club, and they have like Europe's biggest retro and arcade collection. And it's like 4 floors in an old warehouse, and the top floor's just all classics, like 60s, 70s, 80s, and then as you get down, it gets to 90s, 2000s, right up to kind of present day, and tons of crazy import Japanese stuff and physical things, and loads of the ones you described, like the physical shooter things. they're just it's as you get from as you progress from the 80s of huddled around a tiny cabinet, it does go down to the now everything is just trying to kill you with overstimulus.
Yeah, that is definitely a trend in gaming. How do you feel about that trend?
Ooh, well, that's that. I suppose you could. Would we agree in loosely describing that trend as a spectacle? You
Yeah,
think
okay, I'm good with that.
kind of because there's. I mean, I could link it and derail it a bit into the in kind of my art background because there's always an argument going on about the idea of authentic experiences and whether or not spectacle overrules it. And in technology, technologists love a bit of spectacle to push products and push new tech. Like there's no, which is fun and play, but you talk about. I mean, look at Facebook and Meta, kind of loosely on topic in the scenes that we've met. It's like that. That is entirely a spectacle item that has objectively no content. It's like and I suppose going back to the arcade stuff, I'd say spectacle is good. Spectacle grabs attentions, but it lacks the authenticity that comes from having meaningful experiences. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like the real experiences are definitely kind of the measure of authenticity. And so while generally speaking, in any kind of game, you are engaging in escapism. You are in a different world than, strict reality.
Mm.
But how real those experiences are to you as the person enjoying them, I feel is really kind of one of the defining factors on how successful a project is going to be. If you are not delivering on that real felt experience, then people are simply not going to care about your project.
Yeah, I mean, what we're talking about here is Starfield. I got Starfield came with I switched out a graphics card and it came free with it. Was thinking of getting it, got it. I think Starfield is a perfect example of this. It looks fucking awesome. It's got depth of AI mechanics, detail of the world. There's a lot in there. It does a bit of first-person shooter. It tries to be No Man's Sky with its multi-planets. It has procedurally generated worlds. It has creatures. It has a storyline and all this kind of stuff. But at every step of the way, it feels like I'm being presented with a tech demo, and it's like a veneer. Like I'd say, the spectacle's like a veneer which you peel off, and then underneath there's just like a husk of a game. Like it's a shame. Thousands of people working on it. God knows how much money's gone into it. So much time's gone into it. But you peel off that technological spectacle veneer, and what you're left with is a mediocre space game that functions, and you're left with a linear story which you can't get into immersively because everything else is just pulling you in different directions, and its narrative tone is all over the place. It's just like, bam, look at these cool graphics, bam, look at this cool ship. It's like, yeah, this ship is cool, but now it's utterly mundane because I can build it into 500 other fucking ships. So it does devalue from the authenticity of it. But then you look at something like Stardew Valley, which has old school 90s looking graphics, and you can get lost in that game with the narratives of, holy crap, I found the mayor's pants. Do I give them back secretly? Do I put them on display at the market stall? You feel bad for the bollocks, the bus driver lady. I can't remember her name. It turns out she's an alcoholic and she's lost her home, and she's serving the community. Like, you get invested in it, but it doesn't have that insane technological veneer to kind of disconnect you from a lack of any content, because instead it has the authenticity.
That's a wonderful point, and I love the kind of disconnect that you illuminate between the technological side of things, which, I mean, as gamers, we're always glad to see that advance. Like, the more advanced that our hobby becomes, the better it is overall, because you are able to actually gain more of that immersion. But when a project is specifically about the tech side of things and less about the immersion side of things, it really does kind of suffer in the perception of the users overall.
I mean,
Who do you think is best and worst at that divide?
Pick any VR project you want. They're the worst at it.
Ha! Pick any Fiat project you want. They're the worst at it. So Diablo Immortal.
Any VR project.
Oh, VR. Okay.
I mean, you get the other side. I mean, yes, they kind of allude to that as well. But if talking about setting a bad example for the spectacle of technology overruling everything else, VR. Now, this does come with the caveat of there are some truly transformational experiences in VR. Many of them are experiments and small sandbox and demos. But if you look at the mainstream stuff that goes into VR, a lot of it, what happens? You default to everyone plays Beat Saber because that is a thing you can't do outside VR. That's a great experience. That has the spectacle and it has genuine use of the technology. It has an amount of, you're grounded inside it. But then you look at other games that are just another shooter in VR. Well, a good FPS shooter on a 2D screen with a controller is always going to be better than a badly made VR one. And the VR ones just haven't formed themselves into something that's fun yet. The most fun shooter I think I ever played in VR is definitely the Laser Quest looking robot thing that's inside Rec Room, because it's fun. It's grounded in fun first, graphics second. It's technically in VR because that's the environment it's in, and it makes use of it. And so I think VR is the worst example. Best example. I'm gonna pick on I'm gonna say Baldur's Gate. To be honest with you.
Oh, BG3 or BG as an enterprise?
Well, I'm gonna say Baldur's Gate 3 because Baldur's Gate 3, I'd say, needs current generation hardware to run. Granted, it runs on a Steam Deck. I play it on the Steam Deck. That's great, but it's not on PS4. It's on PS5. It does have a massive world. It has the kind of fidelity up there of the technology. But it's one of the few times where you see the breadth of what you can put into a game, and it's the details there, the authenticity's there, and it looks shiny, and it has all of the sides to it. I suppose it helps being built on a decades-old IP and rule system, which is practically embedded into the culture these days.
And that's a very strong point, and I'm actually super glad that you brought up Baldur's Gate because I recently downloaded Baldur's Gate 2, and I have not played it yet, mostly because I'm super busy and my computer is a potato. I know 100% there is absolutely no way I could do Baldur's Gate 3 on my potato. But as someone who is very into RPGs and the D&D community specifically, even though I'm about to be launching a live play series, which is Pathfinder 2e, because fuck Hasbro, and I am not going to give them one red fucking cent. But as someone who, honestly, I say Diablo is the first game I ever loved. That was the first video game I ever loved. I got the D&D Red Box for Christmas after my 8th birthday, and I have been hooked on role-playing games ever since. D&D is the be-all and end-all, and everything else is just trying to get there. With the exception of Pathfinder. Because, Pathfinder stepped in when D&D went from 3rd edition to 3.5, and then they ruined everything by going to 4th edition. Paizo stepped in and said, you know what, we've been publishing content for these guys for long enough. Let's start doing our own shit, and we're just going to take the best that they have ever offered, and we're going to make it better. And that's, I consider Pathfinder to be basically 3.75. And I absolutely fucking loved that system. I'm just about to start a campaign on Pathfinder 2e because I have this awesome-ass world that I have built over the last couple of decades, and I'm very excited to finally be playing it again.
Nice.
But we'll do it on Pathfinder 2nd edition because I do really like a lot of the mechanics. I feel like it's a pretty cool system, and I want to check it out and give it an actual playtest. I feel like if I can remember, there was a question involved in everything that I just said.
Best and worst examples.
How much tabletop gaming have you done?
When I was younger, loads. I mean, I've done a lot of tabletop gaming of all kinds of different types, but the specific RPG, D&D sort of stuff. I haven't done as much in recent years. Used to do loads, but I was more on the cheesy end of it, and I got given like a Hero Quest set and an Advanced Hero Quest set, and then me and my folks, when I was little, we'd build our own rule sets around it. We never really got into full D&D because it wasn't accessible. Like, the stuff wasn't accessible, and Games Workshop stuff was just basically too expensive.
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand. D&D is an expensive fucking hobby, especially for the DM. But even for any, players and whatnot, there's a lot that goes into it. It can be free, but it can also be really fucking expensive. And it very much tries to push you to the really fucking expensive side of things.
My experience with it has always been kind of like homebrew DIY building stuff, and then especially with the rule sets. Like, I've got boxes of the rule sets my dad put together when I was like 14. And I've got tons of the original figures of stuff of like bastardized sets of bits of Hero Quest and bits of Warhammer, and we created our own worlds. And recently, as part of the tourist stuff, we wanted, because we've been writing stories around the world of it for years. There's like some stories are comics, some stories are destined to be short novels. Part of the stories is the actual game, but there's one section of the story which is felt more like an adventure heist. So I've been building a rule set based around a kind of simplified rule set using D20s to create a tabletop heist role-playing game that links into the game we're making, like video game we're making. So I've now got back into it again and been playing little bits of different stuff with people. And I did play during COVID, played an online campaign of, I don't know which edition it was, but it was a D&D edition with some friends. So it's definitely back on the table, and I think it informed the approaches and lore and stories and how things are, like the mechanics behind it definitely inform a lot of what we do in the game dev stuff.
That's awesome. I really I feel in the depths of my soul, which I don't actually believe exists, but that whole like. There's this way towards the video games, and there's this way towards the tabletop. And while your interest is in the tabletop, it's just so much easier to go this way. And I love the fact that you've been kind of taking your amalgamated gaming experience and kind of applying it towards, because that's exactly where Galil came from. Like, everything that I have done for any significant length of time over the past 25 years, give or take, actually probably a little more than that, is kind of represented in Galil. Like the goddess of chaos, and the reason why a corner of the planet is blown off, she is actually the very first character that I made in Diablo. And I used the same name throughout World of Warcraft as my main character, and a few other worlds I have run that same character. And so now I have, a backstory for that character that actually involves her being born on Galil, which is my planet, and then the reason why she went through all of these other places and experienced all of these other things. And because that one same character has just such disparate personalities and abilities throughout each of these different things, the only way to weave them all back together is, she's just completely and utterly chaotic. And so she has become the goddess of chaos in this world. And it really is like every character that I have played for a significant number of sessions, every game that I have ever really and truly loved and put a lot of time and effort into is represented on Galil in some way, shape, form, fashion, or function. So it's all just kind of one big conglomerate, and I love it.
I can resonate with that because that feels like what we're making with the Tourist Station. Like it's a love letter to all the games we've played and all the things we've experienced and the stories and the culture around it. It's a big melting pot of everything that we've loved over the last 20, 30, 40 years.
Fantastic. So tell me a little bit more about Tourist Station. What is this project all about?
Yeah. I mean, there's what is Tourist Station and there's what is Tourist.
Okay.
So I mean, we can start with Tourist Station and work backwards. Because Tourist Station, at its heart, is our love letter to 90s gaming. Like we love like Monkey Island series, all LucasArts stuff, Sierra Online, all of those narrative-led character experiences, which at the time, you had to pick characters or action. Tech caught up, so you can have your cake and eat it. So Tourist Station is our love letter to that time, and it's basically a Stardew Valley mixed with The Sims in space with a healthy dose of William Gibson's Neuromancer style feel to it. It's basically a space social simulation, cyberpunky space opera. But that's the game. What Tourist is a bit more expansive than that. I noticed there's Reverend Tate in the chat there. Reverend Tate is actually the kind of the author of the universe of Tourist. And if you want to go all the way back, about 10, 12 years ago, myself and the Reverend there started a sound project. We're both kind of practicing fine artists. We create installations, sound work, paintings, illustrations, sculptures, all kinds of stuff. And as part of that, we set up a 2-piece performance sound group called Synthetic Life Group. The idea being that we put forward the idea that we built a machine that was sentient and could create music, and we were its technicians. And we built this machine, and then we did gigs with this machine glowing, and we pretended to service it, but actually we were doing live improvised sound generation, but not music. It was like sound and soundscapes and built gear, found sounds, all kinds of stuff. And in the context of kind of a fine art practice, so it was gallery exhibitions that we presented in. As time went on, this evolved into a kind of a more multimedia project, so lots of video work. There's actually on our YouTube channel, there's I think getting on for 60 or 70 albums worth of stuff up there. And when we were living in the same city for a while, split apart, Ben continued to build this world, and he started taking some of the ideas we talked about inside this duo with some of the video work, and he started developing these storylines. And these storylines became illustrations, became intense, large, interconnected stories, which became comics. These comics then manifested, and he's currently still writing the comics and writing his additional storylines and building the world out. At that time, the world was called Double Beta, and since this has been renamed to Tourist, because Tourist is the entity that contains all of time and space and every dimension, universe, and everything that was. And the only thing that is outside Tourist is an island filled with wizards, gorillas, and amazeballs. And that is where Tourist Station is living, because Tourist Station managed to leave the universe. The wealth of lore behind it is hard to summarize in one small bit. So it's
right.
It's large and disparate, but it's also really kind of simple. And I'm probably doing a massive disservice, Ben. I do apologize.
All right, so let me try and wrap my mind around this. So Tourist is basically the multiverse. It encompasses pretty much everything, but then there's this small little world that is outside of that, and that is where Tourist Station is.
If you imagine a kind of a massive, like a kind of a huge cloud of space in the middle, it's dense, like a singularity, and it kind of dissipates, and there's dense bits and non-dense bits, and that's the cosmic river. And inside the center of this cloud is all of time and space and all existence. And outside of it, time and space ceases to happen, and the Maze Town sits outside this. Also really trying hard not to give too many spoilers, because Ben will phone me up and shout at me. And Tourist Station has left its universe to this outside of space and time, and is now kind of floating near a Maze Town. So it is It is basically a multiverse, multi-dimensional, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really matter what you call it. The point is that in the same context as being able to have our story characters specifically in there. So, for example, Natch and Mercy, who are some kind of OP agents of Osiris Dionysus. I probably said that wrong. Ben, you need to correct me if I'm wrong. They are actually two characters which were based on carbon copies of carbon copies of carbon copies of us from now, or us from when we were doing the performance group. So it kind of ties back into the real world, and as it then goes forward into the future, all of these things can clash with anything from any time, space, anything. So, technically speaking, it could have Superman in it. Technically speaking, it could have the Grubfish from Crittercraft in it.
Shout out to Grubfish. Love it.
And technically speaking, everyone on the station could also hate Kanye West because they're aware of him. It's like every
shout out to fuck Kanye West.
It gives us a nice excuse to be able to have literally anything we want in the stories, but the stories are sacred. Like, the way we've positioned it is that everything that's been written in the comics and being written in the comics and being written in the novels and the games is kind of pre-game, like pre-video game. So when we play the video game, it's going to be a little bit Stardew Valley-ish. You got your kind of your daily grind tasks, your little your farming, your dungeon crawling, your exploration in space, but also you've got the kind of the overall narrative, which is you are on an adventure. So it's going to have that that very old, that point and click. What do we call it? Buddy, the other day, like detective investigation feel to you're exploring a story, and I think there's a really good description of RimWorld, the game. Where it's described as a story generator, and that's that at its core. The one-line thing of what Tourist Station is, the game, is it's a story generator. It's a social experience for everyone to take to create an individual, which really is why we ended up with the blockchain aspect, because it's the ideas of individuality and the ideas of what is human, what is an artificial intelligence, what is everything in between. But it just becomes this insane multimedia project. So we've got the games, we've got the music, we've got books, we've got children's books, we've got physical. The amazeballs in it are physical things. We've sent them out to people. It's everything. So it's not just a game which has some blockchain stuff. It's everything. I mean, it's actually literally, there's 4 of us working on it, and to be honest with you, it's basically now our main sole creative output. It's a collaborative of all our creation of authenticity. That's what it is.
I love it. It sounds absolutely amazing and fully engaging. It sounds like a universe and a setup that has a lot of stories to tell, and also to be created. And I love the fact that it is, a creative enterprise, not just for you guys who are, running the project, but also the players as well. From what it sounds like, that to me, that is the reason why tabletop RPGs are like king of all games and can never be dethroned, is because you're not just playing, you are contributing to the story, to the world, to your own fun. You are actively playing a part in it, aside from just pushing buttons and doing whatever. Because like a lot of these games, they have an element of that where your decisions matter, so you might get different endings or whatnot, but you're still, no matter what, in any kind of video game, you are limited in your actions by what is supported by the code. And that is something that does not exist in a tabletop RPG. You are limited only by the combination of the rule set and your DM's imagination.
I think that's why we're calling it a social game, because if you just want a game, you want to sit down and just play a game, then you can just play a game. You get the rules, the code does the rules. But you're right. The tabletop gaming and things around it don't just have. You haven't just got that moment you sit down to play. You've got the moments before where it's planned. You've got the moments afterwards where you're talking to someone and going, "Holy shit! Do you remember what happened the other day? Did you see that?" And you've got the moments where you're building. You're literally finding new characters and you're creating and putting your identity onto them through building and painting and customizing. Like you're reading. You can pick up a book and read about the lore of the background of a race of a character that you play with. It's the nature of the intertextuality of it. Like everything blends together, so it's not just I play tabletop or I play a video game. It's the mixture of everything. Like, and I think that's for me the concept of social gaming isn't the idea that you sit down to play this one game. It's the fact that you sit down and you play this one game, and then it spreads its effect through every other aspect of the social side of things, in terms of discussing the stories and remembering it. It becomes part of your memory in life rather than a singular experience in a game. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is about meshing kind of every avenue of experience that we have, and creating, again, comes down to actual experiences, actual memories, and things that people are going to treasure and enjoy the recollection as well as the actual firsthand experience. And I think that that's something that the corporate world of today has somewhat lost sight of. I feel like there isn't a care or an effort put towards that kind of long-lasting effect. It's all about the immediate gratification, the here and now, and I feel like that's a big part of why we have gone as far astray in a field as we have.
I mean, it's a nice link into the we're having this conversation through the networks of emerging from the Web3 space, which I reluctantly accept calling it Web3. But it's like blockchain technology on a technology level, I find very, very interesting. In its current application, it's just an intense manifestation of late stage capitalism ruining everything. It's that boiling everything down to the line go up. And as much as the meme is a meme and it's all right, it's funny, but at the same time, it is that it's everything is boiled down to that, which means that the projects that manifest from it, on the whole, lack any of the authenticity and reason to exist that gamers and people who want to play. And I think that comes back to the idea of, what does it mean to be human? Well, the natural human state is one where we want to creatively play, explore, and figure stuff out. Like, that is the human creature. The human creature doesn't want to work without thinking, And a lot of that's the thing that surprised me most about the uptake of blockchain gaming was the fact that actually it turns out people have now accepted the greater narrative of the world and are willing just to work instead of play. And that's kind of, I think the knee-jerk reaction I had to that crypto element inside gaming is literally that. It's like, holy shit, the outside world has crept into gaming through this insane route of this blockchain technology, and it's just pouring its money-led poison into it. It's just gonna, it's systematically, as a design, not just as a side effect or an accidental thing, as an actual design methodology, trying to strip away the concept of play and authenticity.
Yeah, it's not so much a bug as a feature of the system. It's kind of ridiculous. I feel like as consumers, as players, as not necessarily followers, but those who are not in the ruling class, I feel like that pretty much nails it on the head. Is like we're all trying to do the best we can and trying to put things together as much as possible, while the entire world is just falling apart around us.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I feel really bad, for Berners-Lee with the supposed inventor of the internet. I mean, at least the figurehead of the inventor of the internet with the protocols and stuff. But he coined the web terms long time ago, like the Web 1 and Web 2 and things. And he actually coined Web 3 long before Bitcoin even existed. But
Interesting.
It's so the concept of a Web3 thing. I mean, I'm a bit of a dick about it. I refuse to accept Web3 as a genre of game in the context of this blockchain stuff. Like, it's nonsense. It was literally, in the last few years, just shoehorned in by the Ethereum co-founder who just wanted to justify the ecosystem on a blockchain. Whereas the original context of Web3 has a far more important meaning, especially if you link it into the concept of metaverse. Because the original one, he described it as the semantic web, which was Web3, and the idea that Web2 was about the first kind of linked apps, you know, the early multiplayer, the early different apps connecting to different apps. OAuth, I suppose, would be a good example of that. And then Web3 is about not the apps being linked, but the data being linked. And this goes back to the ideas of what we were talking about with the D&D and the gaming, the intertextuality of all these different places of data and culture coming together. And Web3, to me, if you're going to call Web3 anything, that's what it is. And to devalue it, to say Web3 is stuff what is on blockchain, considering blockchain is primarily how do you make the fucking token number go up by convincing a bunch of people some lies, just devalues the whole context of what human beings can do with sharing data and sharing information and the social, cultural side of it, you know?
So, what is an actual, solid, strong definition for Web3 to you?
I mean, I suppose the easiest one is the one that's really obvious, and that is, it's just the internet, it's the web. Like, you know, we're back in the 90s, it was the World Wide Web, and before that, it was the idea of it was coined as cyberspace. You know, cyberspace, World Wide Web, Web2, .com, whatever you want to call it. It's just whatever the iteration is. I mean, Second Life was doing shit that blockchain's done 20 years ago. It's not new stuff. It's primarily usurped for marketing money purposes. So in a simple nutshell, I would say Web3 is just the internet. It is the massively connected, huge communication internet. And there's actually a good quote. An artist, and I fucking forget who it is, and I bloody well looked it up because it always comes into my head around these conversations. There is a quote by an artist called Namjoon, and he just said part of it is a precursor is that as a human being, our skin is our interface to reality, and our senses, you know, we can touch, we can feel, that feeds our brain conjures up the reality that's there, with a nice 30 millisecond delay to give us a bit of lag in case it needs to hide anything from us, but effectively our brain already interprets reality and lies to us anyway. So these are just our sensors, these are our first piece of technology. And he's talking about that they are our interface to reality. But technology now, and especially things like phones, what we're doing now, you know, it has extended the range of where that membrane is. You know, like previously it was literally where I could touch. Now, effectively, I have no limit. I could touch anywhere on the planet from a technological point of view.
Yeah, I mean, we're across an ocean from each other and still having this conversation right now. Like,
exactly.
That would not have been possible. Well, it would have been possible to have the conversation 10 years ago, but it would not have been possible to share it with people all around the world 10 years ago.
So if you're talking about Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, to me, Web 3 is, well, look, we've had mass communication. We've got these very mundane objects now, which everybody can get their hands on. Like, more people have these than computers or anything else. You know, people can have these and not have a phone because they give them more agency in the world around us. And if you want to say what is Web 3, well, Web 3 is like the next level of all of this communication coming together, which means we've probably, technically speaking, the metaverse is a good word for the Web 3, despite how disgusting Facebook made the word. But also, that metaverse has been around since the 90s. You know, people had a digital identity. People could talk across continents. And it has got better and better and better. But fundamentally, nothing has really changed in the last 15, 20 years about what can be done. It's just to, like we talked right at the start, the spectacle. All we've done is increase the level of spectacle by which it can be done, not the actual underlying philosophical idea of what it can be done. Now, big data changes a lot of that. You know, the huge data centers and GPT and stable diffusion have got way more to do with the next phase of the internet than anything else. And I think, and the blockchain has got a future in part of it, but the cryptocurrency specifically hasn't moved anything forward. You know, at the end of the day, a crypto market is no different than a fiat market, and is no different than people trading freaking buttons for stuff in a, or just bartering in real life, or anything that's been going on for the last 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years. So it's not new, you know? If that makes sense?
Yeah, it's a new skin, but it's not a new system.
No. It's a highly effective way of doing it, especially with the speed of things. You know, you can pump those tokens real quick with a bit of mass communication to convince a bunch of people of some bullshit.
And not even just that, but the speed of transmission and like there are definitely aspects of the crypto space that are definitive improvements over the fiat space. But I feel like it's an interesting viewpoint that you have presented, and it's something that I never really considered in that way, but I think you're right, that Web3 isn't so much a blockchain specific thing as it is the state of the internet as a whole now. Like, we have evolved into Web3, and that is not blockchain specific. That is something that blockchain is a part of.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, our personal banking, to pick a really boring ass thing. You know, there was a time when it was cash, then there was a time when there was checks, and there was a time when there was cards, and all of a sudden cards could do chip and pin, and holy shit, then you could wave your cards in front of stuff, and bloody hell, now you can copy your card onto your phone, or I can also download it to my watch. Like, the root thing, you wouldn't say, well, we're living in an age of well, I suppose you could say we're living in an age of Visa, but like you wouldn't describe money as Visa. You just still describe it as money, and it's the same way as the blockchain. Like the blockchain is very good at doing that currency stuff, but the blockchain isn't just currency. I think there's a really interesting idea that people miss out on the blockchain. People assume anonymity is what it's about, but I wholeheartedly disagree. What it's about is transparency.
100%. That is the argument every time I hear it, that, oh, you know, blockchain is only used by criminals and thieves and whatnot and so on and so forth. And it's like, no, honestly, like, if you are conducting nefarious activities on the blockchain, you are literally asking to get caught, because that shit is a permanent fucking record. Like,
if I wanted to do tax evasion, what I would do is I would make a sculpture. As a studied, qualified artist, I'd make a sculpture. I'd then go out and I'd find a gallery who'd want to show that sculpture. I'd then probably speak to particular people to get that gallery, a sculpture shown. Then all I'd have to do is convince someone else that that's a good sculpture. I'd write several articles about it by myself, and then I'd get someone to fake value it. By the time that's been through that process 2 or 3 times, this is exactly what the contemporary art industry is. Let's say, hypothetically, I do that particularly well and I end up selling a sculpture for a few million. That's just a way of me moving money around. That's the biggest way of moving money around, is you buy art and move it from one country to another. It's the easiest thing in the world. There's practically no records or tracking for it. That's what the whole contemporary art industry is about. So why people think blockchain would be where most of that goes on, I mean, it's like you said, it's convenient and it's fast and it does have some stuff over it. But on the flip side, it's a public ledger. It's literally a public ledger. Exactly. Anyone can check it. It's like,
if you're trying to be sneaky, leaving a permanent record that is unfuckwithable is not the way to go about that.
And the fun bit is that there's that thing, you know, that there's that, I don't know if it's a cultural thing. It's definitely over here. The idea that nobody talks about their salary. No one talks about how much money they have, and it's usually always people who have money that won't talk about it, because the second you are shown to have more than you need, you innately, as a human being, doesn't matter how much of an asshole you are, you will feel deeply embarrassed about it, because you know you have disproportionately taken more. It may not manifest as that, but it will manifest as your anger that I can't hide all my possessions, you know? And I think that's where the blockchain is amazing, because imagine if you replaced every single monetary system and everybody's ledger, everybody's wallet was open, that every billionaire's wallet was open, and you could literally go, holy crap, look at these people pissing their money away on this stuff. Or they'd have to step up and justify why they were doing it, because they know it wouldn't be right. Obviously there's outliers, there are some assholes, but generally speaking, that disproportionate perception of people's wealth fuels a lot of discontent in the structures of capitalist society. Like if you look at how toxic half of this space is, and the majority of it is basically someone boiling it down to saying, "Oh shit, you just talked shit about something that might mean I get less money today,"
Right. There's definitely a lot of that out there. I've definitely seen on one side of things in a similar vein, like when I stopped running constant giveaways, like 5 to 10 per hour on my Twitch channel, I definitely watched the viewership plummet. And yet the ones who were left behind, those were the ones that I actually appreciated, and those were the ones who even previously I had noticed as being among the best, the most contributory. I noticed that most of the people who left were the ones who were just a drain on the system and kind of toxic in their own right. And I feel like that has larger implications as well.
It does. I mean, it's exactly that. If you stop giving people stuff of value, a lot of people will drop off, which is fine. That's fine. I've said it before. I've said it on stream before. Like, especially in the context of the blockchain stuff, if you're buying assets to do with our game for their value on the secondary market or their ability to sell later on for money, then I kind of don't want you to buy our stuff, because it's like we don't want people to buy it for the value of what it is. That's not what we're interested in. We're interested in the actual making the game, people being connected to the game. It's like I think someone brought it up the other day, like, oh, the stuff is some stuff's gone down on the market, and I'm like, I just don't care if the stuff goes down on the market. The secondary market is nothing to do with what we build as a game. Like, it's something everyone else is dealing with, and the second we are cognizant of that as a concept and we design to maintain that, we've already fucked the game up. We've already fucked our ability we've removed our authenticity and our authorship. And then all we're doing is we are literally kind of operating in the popularist approach of what do I do to tick all the boxes to make sure people keep doing this thing. And it's like, well, that's where the whole world is kind of down that sinkhole at the minute,
Yeah, absolutely. So, trying to think of how to phrase this. You've brought up AI a couple of times, and it's something that I've been putting a lot of thought into lately, and a little bit of research. I can't say a lot of research. And I can definitely see a situation where AI leads us into utterly dystopian futures. And I can see a few routes by which we get there. I can also see kind of that outlying chance of how it could be our salvation as a species. Because, that potential is there. But I also see how unlikely it is for things to manifest that way because of the power structure that we already have in place and the kind of requisite greed in order to even find yourself in one of those positions. And so I wonder how you feel AI as a technology portends for the future of humanity.
Well, I would break it down into kind of two phases. Like, for example, right now there's no such thing as AI. Like, there is machine algorithms, there is machine learning, and you can brute force a neural network to do various things. We do that ourselves in some of the games we make. And you can use GPT, which is the big ass vector-based search engine for tokenizing the whole of human language. It's very good, and it does work very well. I use it every day in programming because it's just fucking incredible. However, they're all dumb. They don't think. They don't do. There's no intelligence. There's statistical outcomes. There's an analysis of stuff. There's there's a chance that what it produces is usable. Stable Diffusion is a perfect example of it. And Midjourney, you can create cool looking images, but you try creating two cool looking images of the same type, or or try and hold some narrative coherence about it, or do any sort of act on it which has a piece of editor,
or
the
try
hand
and
of an
make a minotaur.
Yeah, any of it. If you try and create, if you consider it makes very cool spectacle. It doesn't do very well at creating consistency and usable information unless it is controlled by a human and beaten into shape by a human and then edited by a human. Like at the end of every good machine learning process is a human being editing the output, be it visual, be it text-based, code-based. And I think that's where, to specifically answer your question, at the moment, while machine algorithms are dumb, then it leads us down the darkest timeline. And I'd like to think that if the machine algorithms did get to a point of having an actual AI, so let's say define that by the singularity of artificial general intelligence, I think at that point, if you had something like that, then it becomes out of our control. So the question is how dark does it get while it's still in our control? And what will be left of us by the artificial general intelligence does manifest? Which is, kind of handy because that's also part of the storylines to the truest stuff. But it's one of the big discussions we have on it.
Right, of course it is, because it's a very salient discussion to be having in this era, and it is something that has heavy implications for the future. And I kind of like that the distinguishment that you made, that what we have now is not AI. What we have is language models and machine learning, and it is true that what we have is not technically AI. AI is just marketing at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you think that AI is actually possible for us to achieve, or do you think that that is something that will end up killing ourselves off or failing to reach by some other means?
I suppose you could argue that I've spent my life deeply embracing technology. Like, I grew up with various issues. Like, I didn't speak to many people. I struggle with ADHD and daily with autism symptoms and things. And technology was my escape. It made me feel like there was literally no limit to what I could interact with and achieve. And so I suppose I could say that I'm literally stood in a room now and I'm just surrounded by bits of technology that have either built, kind of hacked together. It's a very big part of my life. So I think I would err on the side of, I think it could be possible. I think it is possible that an artificial general intelligence can manifest. I don't know what timeline. And I think when it does, I would say, I'd say it probably decide to get rid of us. I mean, if you do the maths, we suck pretty bad.
Thank you. Yes.
Not individually. I think this is the thing.
No, but as a species, we are fucking terrible. Oh my god.
But it's not as a species. It's as a system. We're awful. As a group of consumers trying to shred our own environment, we're awful. As a species, by nature, we are communitarian and we don't want to do stuff like that. But there is too many of us, and we live in a state of fight and flight survival constantly, especially in all over the world. Like, yes, things are a lot better than they have been in the past. We have better medicine, but the disproportionate gap between rich and poor gets bigger. You know, there's atrocities that still happen. So on the whole, as a structured society, we suck. But as a species, we don't suck. And I think trying to get that across to an AGI, hypothetically, on its creation, would be an important part of whether it decides to finish it or not. You know, which as a biased thing, I think comes across from continuing to show our ability to actually think and play and be compassionate. And if we just continue to remove that from daily life and remove the opportunities to do that, then yeah, you know, just snuff us out. It's fine. Earth doesn't care.
So what do you think is the single greatest threat to humanity currently?
Single greatest threat to humanity currently? I'm going to go with the internet.
Okay, elaborate on that, because the internet, you could be looking at that as Web3. You could be looking at that as the, you know, let's
say the greatest thing. The problem we have actually, I believe, comes from the fact that we create technology that, as a species, we are not capable of using. We're not socially and emotionally evolved enough as a species to use the technology we have. You know. We're dumbasses who've been given some really cool space guns, and I think yeah. Actually, no. I think that is. I think Rob's just nailed it. Actually, I think when Elon is probably the biggest threat, not personally, but what he represents, because what he represents is the mass consumer version of the internet, of the peak of technology, but through the lens of an economist. And an economist that believes that GDP and kind of future furthering the line go up mentality is the best thing over everything else. You know, like Tesla ain't trying to save the planet. Tesla's virtue signaling to make his line go up, and he's so obsessed in the numbers of is this tech possible that anyone doesn't really think about whether or not as a species we should do it. You know. Like we shouldn't have mobile phones at this point. We're just us as a species. We can comprehend generally. I think it's groups of like 100, 150 people. I think we're still that kind of, you know, monkey brain stuff.
Yeah.
And outside of 150 people, we just break. So mass communication and the internet by default breaks us as a species. So we already operate in a way that negatively affects how we live, how we interact with others, and layer on top of that the systems which effectively keep us alive now, with the methods of mass production of food, with the methods of kind of strict government, and with the fucking rich, like the 1% rich, like they will kill you to eat your face when they figured out how to process you into a burger that's tasty.
Yeah, 100%.
But all of that built on the idea of the utopia of the internet, of the utopia of technology. It's like, look over there, look, we can get to this place where all this magical stuff happens. And it doesn't come with the creative thinking and play and experimentation. It comes with a straight line down the middle of this makes the economy go up. This makes your line look awesome in the future. You know, I think that's the danger to us. It's that money-based approach over humanity-based approach.
So do you think that the underlying problem there is the internet and the kind of widespread influence that it affords, or do you think that the underlying issue there is just capitalism and the dying throes of a failed system?
Yeah, I suppose that's what I'm saying. It's what it represents with the technology. It's unchecked moving forward on technology before it's and the repeating of the same sorts of technologies just to make them faster rather than better. There's a really cool there's kind of a new thinking philosophy called speculative realism, and as part of that there is this idea of accelerationism, which is a bleak thought, but I really struggle to get my head out of thinking that's quite a good idea, that actually. There's two important things that come from it, and one of them is that while you are inside a system, so you could argue we are in a consumer-led capitalist system. Like I live in Britain, I have to pay my taxes, water bill. I have to go to the shop to buy most of my food because I can't go down the road and find some freaking animals and crops and shit. Like I don't have any space to grow. Like I have to earn money to engage with a system for my survival. Like it's not my choice, but that's what I have to do if I want to stay alive. And there's an idea that while you are in this system, you're incapable of coming up with the idea that comes afterwards. Like you are always going to be tainted by that system. So I think, like for example, environmentalists are constantly trying to turn back the clock on things. You know, let's dial it all back. Let's be better. Now, ethically, I agree with so much of what that's about. But in reality, in the systems that we live in, what we're actually doing is we're slowing down the pace at which we slam into the singularity and that kind of breakwater point of like, okay, now civilization and culture and humanity is fundamentally going to have its reckoning. You know, it's like things as it's not like the world's going to end, but it's kind of like civilization and the structures of society as I know it will change so significantly. It's like the world has ended for a new system to come out of it. And until that point, we're going to be stuck in capitalist society. So the idea of accelerationism is, okay, well, the most humane thing we can do is double down on consuming, on wrecking the planet, on killing everything, and being assholes so that we can just rip the plaster off real quick to let whatever remains kind of surface up and be okay afterwards, you know, or whatever that decides to do. So
I really like the fact that you said that there's 4 magic words in there. You said, as I know it. And I think that's really the point of it. And, like, even REM hit on this, like, forever ago in their, you know, one and only hit. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. It's not the end of the world. It's the end of the world as we know it. I'm not saying that humanity would not survive whatever kind of apocalypse comes. There's definitely something coming. Like, I don't know what's going to happen first. Is it going to be the complete and utter collapse of the worldwide economy? Is it going to be some kind of AI uprising? Is it going to be aliens? Is it going to be, you know, the planet itself finally deciding once and for all that she's had enough of our shit? I don't know where the source is, but there is definitely an end of the world as we know it coming. And I mean, think
it could simply be as boring as a significant financial collapse, like mundane, and people could still, you know, be trying to do stuff, but it could just literally be as something as mundane as, oh no, well, finance is broken now.
Yeah, and but also at that point, like, as long as this system has been going on, and as long as this system has been failing, could there be a few more iterations of, oh, well, this shit is hitting the fan, but we can recover? Or, like, how many more times can the system fail before it fails completely?
I don't think it will ever fail completely. It just iterates. Like, we weren't the same species we are now tens of thousands of years ago. And there's been enough mass extinctions on the planet. I think what we're currently inside the ongoing 9th mass extinction, and we just stuff just evolves, you know. We maybe will come out the end of it with less legs or no ears, I don't know, but like something will continue. And I think that's the problem, is that we live so fast now that we lose sight of time. You know, people talk about, how did these people do these great feats in the past? And it's like, well, that's because they could think in longer times. Now, if I don't get a text back off someone in 30 seconds, I might have a panic attack. You know, like it's instead of sending a letter that might not ever come back. It's just, we talk about it in terms of distances as well. Like, Britain's pretty small. You know, you guys have got a big ass country there. And I remember when I visited Ben in Canada, like, everything felt massive, and distances fundamentally changed. Like, we popped to lunch with to meet up one of Ben's old friends, and we drove, I think it was like 4 hours to go for lunch. Well, here, you drive 4 hours if you've planned a big trip somewhere, you know. 2 hours is a big ass day out, and you might stay over. Whereas previously, people would walk a month. Like if people forget how far you can get walking, like a month and a bit, you could walk from here to Rome. People think, oh, that pilgrimage must have taken 1,000 years in the past when they did those back in the day. But it's like, no, you can walk everywhere. You know, a day or two, I can get halfway down to the middle of Wales. People would walk up once. It was in the Mesolithic times. People would walk from all over the UK up to Wales. They'd spend a month walking here. They'd collect all their blank stone axes for the year, and they'd disappear off. And some people would come as far from like the Mediterranean to do that. Those are concepts we couldn't comprehend now because we're so used to living in the absolute now. You know, if I order something on Amazon, I might, if I do it early enough in the morning, I might get it by the afternoon.
Right.
And there's no concept. So if you talk about the species as a future thing, how could we possibly look at the future? Because the idea of things changing as we know it, you know, it's changing so fast now that we can't really see how fast it's changing. It's.
And I think that is, maybe I never really elucidated it or thought along those lines before, but I think that is exactly why I try and keep an eye on the future and the things that are coming, because you're 100% correct. As a society, that is not something that we are doing anymore. Everything is about the here and the now and the instant and the more, and there is no thought to tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, 100 years from now. And I feel like that is a big part of how we have gotten to the state that we are, which is just undeniably broken. And
yeah, I mean, yeah, it affects everything. It affects the kids. I do schools workshops, and you know, I'm a game dev. I do workshop with kids. Therefore, they're going to schools to do a workshop with kids, and they're like, okay, what we're gonna do a day of workshops. Oh, I tell you what, we're gonna do a week of workshops. Like, what do you want to do? Want to make Fortnite? Well, we can't do that. Oh, I don't want to do it then. It's like, okay, but do you think you could make Fortnite in a week? Oh yeah, easy. It's just makes it, doesn't it? Just makes it. It's like, no, this shit takes years with thousands of people. And then you look at this space again, like with the projects that came out in the bull market in Wax and things and the blockchain games, like it was bare minimum effort to create the money. So the expectation was you have to iterate on this in days, and then even other devs get sucked into that of like, holy shit, we've got to produce. I mean, last year we were feeling the pressure to do that, and thankfully we just kind of like stepped back and said, no, we're building something proper. We're not trying to service this lightning speed because the capitalist economy around it desires it of me, you know. And I think it's all pervasive in every side of society now. There's no patience. There's no waiting for anything.
Yeah, not even doctors have patience anymore.
No. Oh no. I don't do puns.
Well, you laughed at that one, so I'll take it.
Yeah, I got it. It's soft.
So, okay, maybe you have an answer for this, maybe you don't. Do you think that there is an entity that is more culpable than any other for the current brokenness of society?
Singular or generic group?
However you feel like tackling the question.
Because it's always easy to blame the bankers, blame the government and everything, all that kind of usual stuff. But I don't know, it's tricky because it's like that's a chicken and egg. That's a chicken and egg question, that, because on the one hand, if people weren't so complacent, as a let's take a microcosm of things, you know, the Web3 space, for example, because it's just relevant in the context of stuff. People talk about, actually this actually kind of works as a metaphor. People bitch about rugs and multi-accounters and stuff on chain, yet the functional requirements for a project to succeed on chain is to multi-account, pump, and rug. Like, that is the defined design cycle that is a successful crypto project. And while that happens repeatedly, people buy into them, and they will say, "Oh, that stupid Project Rogue. Oh, I know that person. They've already stolen blah 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 blah," and then they'll go, "Oh, I'll just buy something just in case. I'll just be complacent and compliant enough, a little bit, not fully. I still got my anger, but just a little bit of compliance, just a little bit." And that, all that does is vindicate that project. Now you extrapolate that out to society, and to be honest with you, I'd say the most culpable people are all of us people who literally don't go out and riot every single day. You know, we all have reasons, we all have different approaches to it, we all have different survival mechanisms, but ultimately there's only so long you can sit there in your own shit going, "Oh, this stinks," you know. Nobody needs new TVs, but people buy new TVs. Yes, it's because they might be sad. Yes, because consumerism pushes on them at every time, but at every moment. And yes, people are indoctrinated, and yes, people are getting miseducated. But at the root cause is the fact that it's as a whole population, everyone is apathetic enough, and everyone is stuck enough to just want the status quo to continue. So yeah, so maybe the biggest group of people, the largest contributor, is everyone who hasn't run riot every single day. You know, all the people that work at Facebook that didn't go in on Monday and torch the offices.
God damn, that's harsh. That is absolutely correct, and thank you for saying it, but fuck, that is harsh. The fault is mine. Viewers, the fault is yours. Totally I never even thought about it from that point, because the fact of the matter is that there are so many people, entities, corporations, whatever, governments out there that are taking advantage of each and every one of us. But you're 100% correct. The fault is ours because we're letting it fucking happen. Think of the level of hypocrisy of this situation. This was a real situation. The other day, I was complaining about pretty much this sort of stuff of like, oh, things don't change. It's all, oh, nobody gets all pissed off. It's all about comfort and stuff. And I was sat there, and I'd made I don't know if you have a toasted tea cake. Have you ever seen one of those? It's like a little toasty bread thing with raisins and stuff, and you toast it. It's delicious. Anyway, local bakery had made some. My partner picked some up from her shop because there was some left at the end of the day, brought them home, and also there was some cream from a local dairy, and I was like, oh, I fancy this, so I got the cream and I made some butter, and then I had this toasted tea cake. So I had this absolute decadent thing sitting in my nice sofa in my nice warm house going, oh, it's terrible society, people should do more. Num, 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 num. It's like the hypocrisy, you know. Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I feel that, and again, like that was a very good answer. Not only because there's no fault in it, but also because it's something that I had not thought of from that point of view before. But yeah, as I guess it's not a uniquely American thing, to be sure. But it's definitely kind of a trait of the American society that we're always looking for, who to pin the blame on. And it doesn't matter what we're talking about. It's always, the same response is, okay, well, who do I shift the blame to? Who do I put the blame on? Who do I get angry at? Not, how do I fix the situation? How do I make things better? How do I make sure that this doesn't happen again? And yeah, I feel like that's exactly where the problem lies, that there are very few people trying to fix the problem. There are only people who are trying to point out the problems and are trying to figure out who to blame for the problems. And that is something that for a long time now I have been actively on the first part of that and less on the second. I'm not faultless. I'm not perfect. I do still seek for that scapegoat sometimes, but I'm really more interested in what's the actual problem, what's the solution to the problem, rather than who do we blame for the problem. Because blame does nothing.
I've got ideas of solutions, and we're all our parents' children to some extent. We're always influenced by the people around us. And my mum's a professor of sociology, and she talks a lot about pro-social modelling, and it's really stuck with me in my life as an approach. Now, I've not always succeeded at it, and I still don't always succeed at it, but I try to. And it's, you can't tell people what to do. You can't give people a bunch of facts and say, look, these facts means you should think like that.